We all want loud, punchy, in-your-face mixes, and then when you try to make it sound more punchy, it ends up starting to sound worse. If this is your first time here, I'm Andrew Barr with Producing in the Box, where I teach you how to make incredible sounding music without analog gear, and I think you're better off without it. And if you're not new here, welcome back. I appreciate you. So getting your mixes to sound loud and punchy can definitely be a problem sometimes, and there has to be something that I have to say right off the bat before we even get into some of the techniques of how to make your mixes sound more punchy. Genre matters. If you're messing around in metal or in hip hop, you almost have to make them sound significantly more punchy than if you were messing around with something like jazz or R&B. It's a different type of punch. Today I chose a metal mix because it really kind of shows off exactly what to do to get a punchy mix in just about any genre, but keep in mind that it's going to change just a little bit for your genre. Make sure you are using reference tracks so you know what a good punchy mix sounds like in your genre. Metal and hip hop seem to be like the loudest, the most punchy and in-your-face mixes. It's why it's some of my favorite music. So now that I got that out of the way, now let's jump on into the DAW and I'll show you some of the techniques that I use to get my mixes to sound more punchy. So I have a little metal track that sounds like this. So there's a lot going on. It's really punchy, it's really in your face, and it really is loud. So there's a couple things that you can do to actually get here. But first I want to mention that you need to know what punches in your mix. Out of every single track, what are the one or two instruments that are actually driving the punch, or that you want to drive the punch behind your mixes? What instruments are going to make it sound like it's in your face? For this metal mix specifically, it's going to be the drums and the bass. So I'm using some drums that sound really, really good. This is what they sound like by themselves. And then I also have this bass down here, which I have split into two different tracks. One for just the low frequencies, and then one for just the grit frequencies here. Here's just the low, and then here's just the grit. And then together. Now if we bring both the drums and the bass in, you'll start to really see how this mix sets together and where a lot of the punch is coming from. So you can tell that just the drums and the bass is really driving most of that low end, that punch, and making it sound like it's in your face. This is really good. So now that we've identified what instruments that we want to actually bring up and what instruments are actually making that punchy sound that we're looking for, now we can just amplify those. So we'll start with the drums. To make a mix sound punchy, it's gonna have a lot of transients. So if something hits hard, that has a lot of transients. There's the ADSR curve, which is attack, decay, sustain, and release. And then initial attack is where your transient is in the mix. So for example, down here on the bass, I used a pick on this bass, and I have some pretty nice transients here when I was stroking the pick across the strings. There's a transient, there's one, there's one, there's one, there's one, and those transients start to poke through in the mix. The drums are specifically transient heavy. These are MIDI drums, but they really poke through the mix and they really have a nice, like, solid transient in them. So now what we can do is, now that we know what the instruments are and we know what we're looking for to get them to sound more punchy and more in your face, we can start working on that directly. So I'm going to be using a transient shaper on the bus. So here's my drum bus. I'm using a thing called multipass. This is in the Slate All Access bundle. If you are a Slate digital user, I have free VMR presets. You can just scroll down right now and click the top link in the description. You can have them for free. In fact, I'm using one of these presets here for this drum mix, and this is what it sounds like. If I turn that off, so I'm already getting a decent amount of punch just from the VMR. So if you do have Slate digital plugins, just scroll down right now, click the top link in the description, and you can have these presets for free. So now I'm using multipass, and I'm using transient shapers on specific frequencies. So I like to use transient shapers on specific frequencies. You can do it on specific instruments, like if you just wanted to do it on the kick drum or on the snare drum, if you just have a transient shaper and you don't have multipass. But for this video, I want to show you in multipass so that way I can actually solo the specific bands along the frequency spectrum. So let's solo the drums, and I'm going to solo some of these bands, and then I'm going to turn the transient shaper on and off, and you're going to be able to hear what it's doing. This transient shaper is increasing the attack on the low end here at around 113 in lower hertz, and then I have another transient shaper that's increasing the attack and a little bit of the sustain between 113 and 181. That's kind of where the fundamental frequency of that snare drum is. I'll go more into the fundamental frequency at the end of this video, so stick around for that. So now I have the low end soloed. Make sure you're listening on headphones so you can actually hear this. So everything that's 113 hertz and below, I am soloing with this. And now I'm going to turn the transient shaper on. I'll turn it back off. Now bring it back in. A lot of that low end starts to really poke through. I'm really making a nice transient in that low end. Once again, make sure you're listening on headphones so you can really hear the difference here. This makes a massive difference as far as sitting in the mix goes, because now we have a really nice low end, a fundamental punch that everything can build off of. Now, I also want that snare to poke through as well, because the kick drum and the snare drum are the most punchy parts of the drum set. So now I'm going to solo that frequency here, in between here and here, which is 113 and 181 hertz. And then I will turn the transient shaper on and off, and you'll be able to hear what I'm doing there. I'll bring the transient shaper in. Turn it off. Bring it back in. I'm really making it poke through just a little bit more. I'm bringing up the attack by about 18, 19% here, and then the sustains at 17%. Really makes a massive difference. So now if I just unsolo that, so that way we can hear the whole frequency spectrum. Now I'm going to turn this whole plugin on and off, and you're going to be able to hear what the difference is just in the drums by themselves. Turn it off. I'll bring it back in. It's subtle, but it makes a massive difference in the context of the mix. Let's check this out. Makes a massive difference. So remember earlier when I was talking about the fundamental frequency? This also plays a massive role in getting punchy mixes. If you want to know more about the fundamental frequency, you can just click this video right here. In that video, I show you what the fundamental frequency is, why you need to know what it is, and how to use it. So click that video to learn more about how to get punchy mixes, and now as always, go create.